welcome to another edition of Look Back 2000 as Richard and I continue our journey around the region in search of the people, the places and the events that have helped shape the West. Well, this week we've arrived in Portishead, not far from Bristol, on the North Somerset coast.
Well, this is a town that certainly moved with the times. Its power station and docks, big employers of local labour, may have gone, but Portishead's marching on into the 21st century with the building of hundreds of new homes and a splendid new marina.
Stay with us as we chart a course through Portishead's history aboard a Campbell steamer. The institution that drummed some discipline into wayward boys. And the railway line that just might get back on track one day.
Well, I'm afraid with the mist so low, the only thing we can watch here in the channel at the moment is a couple of boats passing. But on a clear day, you really can see for miles, certainly all the way across to the Welsh coast. Ken, I know Portishead is important. I mean, here we are on the historic approaches to Bristol, and there are two lighthouses here that sort of guided and guarded the shipping. One of them is Black Nor, and that's over there. We can't see it.
Down the channel, that's right.
Yeah. How old was Black Nor?
That's the first one. That went up in 1894. It's rather unusual, actually, because it is known as the lighthouse on legs, because it has a top and then legs to support it.
Is that one still working?
Oh, very much so, yes. The Ashford family were the lighthouse keepers. They were farmers at Blacknor Farm, but they also kept the lighthouse, 3 generations of them for 70 odd years.
So you've got to remember each day, milk the cows, go and light the lighthouse.
That's right, and then blow it out again in the morning.
The other lighthouse is the one down there on the edge of Battery Point.
Right.
The ship's just passed that, hasn't it, with the tug behind?
That's right.
Now, what's the significance of Battery Point?
Well, Battery Point is really guarded the sea approaches to Bristol because the deep water channel, as you can see where the ships are passing, is very, very close to Battery Point. And by having a fort on the point, or a lookout point, it made it a good defence point for the sea approaches to Bristol.
Well, some historic ships have passed that point just recently, haven't they?
We've had the Matthew, the replica, go up and down, with a flotilla in support of it.
That must have been quite a sight.
I mean, this lighthouse is quite new, actually. It was only put up in 1931, so there was no real navigation aid on the point there. It's not until that time.
But of strategic importance for many centuries?
Oh, yes. I mean, there was Portishead Fort was built there back in the time of the Civil War, and the records have it that the first defences were put up at the time of the Armada threatening, and then it was refortified in Napoleonic times and then decommissioned, refortified for World War I and decommissioned in World War II. Yeah. So it's come and gone.
So it's just you left minding the fort now, then? When the rusting Battery Point lighthouse was decommissioned, the Port of Bristol Authority offered to pay for a small replica. But townspeople have raised the extra cash to build a more fitting landmark, spurred on by a campaign led by Carol Thomas.
It's pretty up here, and everybody that comes from along the promenade always come up onto the lighthouse. Where is there you can go and walk on the lighthouse so close, with children, young and old people.
And as you say, it's part of Portishead and you don't want to lose it.
We definitely want to lose it, no.
Well, now, you'll have your lighthouse looking pretty much the same, but there's one thing missing, isn't there?
Yes, and that's our bell.
What happened to that?
As far as I know, it was taken to Bristol, and everybody in Portishead keeps on now, can we have our bell back?
Do you know where it is?
In a lockup somewhere in Bristol.
Well, hopefully somebody's watching who knows where it is and will let you have your bell back.
Cruising down the river on a Sunday afternoon.
The Victorian residents of Portishead like nothing better than to treat themselves to a special excursion and take a trip on a steamer. Plenty of fresh air, the chance to admire the view, to promenade on deck or take refreshment in the saloon. Most famous of all were the Campbell steamers, and to this day the Balmoral and the Waverley carry on the tradition.
It just happened that Captain Alec Campbell had brought the little Waverley down here for a charter in 1887, like what he saw, and he and Captain Peter set up a small office on the quayside at Cumberland Basin. By the First World War, they had a total of 14 paddle steamers. And not only were they operating here in the Bristol Channel, but also they were down on the south coast as well. So they'd really developed quite considerably. And it was a day out. It was good food. It was fresh air and bars all day.
And that was the attraction if you were coming over from South Wales, wasn't it? On a Sunday when Wales was dry.
Oh,
you could come over here and have the odd drink.
well, the odd drink or two. Very happy crowds went home from afternoon cruises on a Sunday.
Now, you've written a book about your beloved white funnels, white funnel magic, and you've got a photograph in here of a Portishead man connected with the Campbell steamer.
Yes. Here we have Captain Joe Ashford, who, when the Waverley got a bit long in the tooth, he took her over for her shorter cruises. He was a Portishead man and lived out at Blacknor, just by the lighthouse, and he had a pilotage ticket for the River Severn, and he was very useful because he could take the little Waverley up to Chepstow and up to Sharpness and up the river and up the Avon for afternoon cruises.
Now, I mentioned the Waverley and the Balmoral, which lots of people will know well. Only going to be able to sail on one of them this summer, though.
Waverley is being refitted, and it's £3.7 million is being spent on her in Great Yarmouth. At this moment, she's absolutely stripped to a bare hull. But we hope that later in the summer, she will rise resplendent again, and we'll hear that thump, 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 thump up past Battery Point once again.
Did you know the man who wrote Roses of Picardy and Danny Boy was born in Portishead? His name was Fred Weatherly, and altogether he wrote 1,500 songs.
It wasn't only the big cities like Bristol and Gloucester that suffered during the last war. With its power station and docks, Portishead was a target too. Well, those two sites managed to escape any damage, but nearby Albert Road didn't get off quite as easily. Evelyn and Joan were mere girls at that time, but you were at home the day the bombs fell, weren't you, in this very house?
We were, yes. The thing I remember most is the noise and the confusion and my sister screaming because she couldn't see. She hadn't made it to the shelter, and she had lots of dust in her eyes, and my mum wasn't there either. And that's my impression, all this horrible noise and tiles and glass and stones flying everywhere.
Evelyn, what do you remember of that day?
Well, I was actually in the shelter with my sister. My mother was out here talking to the two men that were killed, and my sister was getting a bit fed up with being there on her own. So I went up to my mum and said, will you come down and see to Joan? She's not very happy down there. So my mum came down the garden into the shelter, and her and I were just getting into the shelter when the bomb dropped. And of course, as Joan said, there was all this noise and dust and so anyway, she was very lucky that we got into the shelter.
I was going to say, thank God you called your mum down.
Absolutely, yes. And it was daylight, of course, when we got up, and my mum was absolutely horrified and devastated when she saw, because they'd worked hard to buy their house, and they were both absolutely devastated.
And just total chaos everywhere. And there was this pervading smell of gas, because when the bomb dropped just there, it broke the gas main.
Well, we're standing not very far from where the bomb crater was, aren't we?
That's right, just here, just
over there.
And I can still smell that to this day, that horrible, horrible smell. And I can remember my father saying, luckily the water main broke as well, and that drowned the gas main, otherwise we'd all been gassed as well.
Now, I know you two don't live in the street anymore, but I can't help noticing that your old house is the only one that's still got its original railings.
That was because during the war, all metal things were confiscated to make ammunition or whatever, and my father got wind of this and cut them off before the gang got here to do it, and he hid them in the chicken shed. So after the war, he put them back again.
Well, we said goodbye to Evelyn and Joan, and now we've come to say hello to Joan's husband, Ray, who's been involved with the Portishead Lifeboat probably for more years than you care to remember, I should think, Ray?
Yes, well over 30 years now. I was involved with the setting up of the original system, and I'm still involved, although I don't actually go out in the boat now. I'm T-boy, tractor driver, or anything other odd job.
You see, I would have thought a place like Portishead would always have had a lifeboat, but as you mentioned, only in the last 30 years or so.
Only in the last 30 years, yes. With the coming of the boating after the end of the war, and that became very popular, the RNLI set up a shore boat scheme whereby they could call on local rescue boats to assist in rescues, and that's how it all started. The local sailing club had a rescue boat here, and it was used to rescue anyone out here. In fact, it launched 229 times in 25 years, assisted 404 people, and actually saved 34 lives.
That's a pretty impressive record.
It's a very impressive record, yes. How we come by this boat, the Coast Guard were unable to fund it anymore, and the local sailing club couldn't afford to carry it on. The people of Portishead got up a petition and said, we need a lifeboat here. We presented the petition to the Woodspring Town Council, and they very kindly let us have £5,000 towards a start. And we did a lot of fundraising, and within 53 weeks we'd raised £30,000, enough money to have this boat purposely built for us. And in 4 years we've launched 46 times, and we've actually saved a further 2 lives.
More and more people like to go out on their boats these days, but are they qualified? Do they know what they're doing?
No, I'm afraid not. During the summer months, we always refer to some of our catchers as belonging to the Birmingham Navy. They keep their boats up on the canals and that in Birmingham and around Worcester way, and then nice, bright, good summer, we'll go out into the Channel, and that's when the problems start. But it can happen to, we can have most experienced people come to grief out here.
What are your particular memories? Because you were coxswain, weren't you?
Yes, I was coxswain for 25 years. We've had good times and we've had some bad times. I suppose one of the best memories really when the Coast Guard informed us there were 4 children cut off by the tide along here. Mm-hmm. And the tide was coming in, and we only had a matter of minutes to save them. And I know, speaking to the Coast Guard officer afterwards, he said it was the longest 20 minutes of his life, waiting to know that we'd taken off those 4 children and saved them.
But you did it?
We did it, yes.
We're going to take a break now, but do stay with us for part 2, when we'll be looking back to Portishead's days as a seaside resort.
Yes, and looking ahead as the town builds itself a new future on an old landmark. See you in a couple. Welcome back to Portishead, to a place that really sums up the town's past, present and future. The site behind me used to be home to the power station, whose chimneys were a landmark for miles around. Well, as you can see, today it's a building site, but very soon it's going to provide literally hundreds of homes and a brand new marina, taking Portishead into the 21st century in grand style.
Well, Johnny, you worked here at the power station for 10 or more years. How important was it?
The stations themselves, back in those days, it was the 3rd biggest power station in the country in terms of output, and one of the 3rd most efficient as well, as it happens, and therefore it was vital to the economy of this country at this power station. It was very important indeed.
How many people worked here?
About 800 in the power station and 200 odd in the research departments.
This was coal-fired, wasn't it? So we had coal.
Mostly coal-fired. There's a little bit of oil from the beginning, and it converted to oil later on, but it was mostly coal-fired, the station, yes.
2 of the original 4 power station chimneys were demolished in 1982. 10 years later, the other 2 bit the dust. How did you feel when it all came to an end and you saw those chimneys coming down?
Well, you feel sad in a way, but then you look to the future and more things are going to happen, and what's going to happen here now is going to be very exciting.
Johnny, asking you to put your other hat on now, town planning, and maybe your thoughts for this development. We're having housing here, we're having a marina here, lots of homes for people, lots of water for them to put their boats on. What about the jobs?
Well, that's the difference, you see. Back in the old days in the power station, we had a balanced community, and there's a sense of belonging to the town. And sadly, I think most of the commuters who get up in the morning, go into Bristol and come back in the evening, they don't have the opportunity to feel they belong to the town in the same way, which is a great loss.
But as far as this development goes and the housing and the marina, am I right in thinking that this is one development where most people are quite happy for it to go ahead?
Oh, the development, yes, it's on brownfield site anyway, but the development they're going to do here, they've really pushed the boat out. The scale is right for the docks, and behind it you've got these lovely crescents and terraces. It's going to have the flavour of Clifton and Bath about it. It's going to be a superb development. All we ask is do the same again on the other side, but give us some employment land as well for the people of Portishead and people who are going to live here.
Did you know this church originally had no saint's name? The oldest part of the current building dates back to the 14th century, and there is evidence of a Norman chapel. But it wasn't until the 1800s that the church adopted St. Peter as its patron saint.
Here's a sight to gladden the heart of steam fans, a champagne excursion along the Bristol to Portishead line, recreating the good old days. The first train went along this line in 1867, stopping at the pier station to serve the packet ships and carry passengers and goods back to the Bristol and Exeter line. When the second power station opened in the 50s, the train station was moved to be closer to it, but the line fell victim to Dr. Beeching and closed to passengers in 1964. Since then, there have been a number of plans to reopen it, none successful so far, but today there are more talks of bringing back the service.
We certainly need it with all the growth in housing in Portishead. I mean, Junction 19 is getting a bit of a nightmare in the morning with all the traffic going into Bristol, and it would be very nice to have this as an alternative way of getting there.
Now, the other line was the quaintly named WC&P.
Yes, to give it its full title, it was the Western Clevedon and Portishead Light Railway. It was authorised by an Act of Parliament back in the 1880s, but the first stretch of it ran from Weston-super-Mare to Clevedon, and that was opened in 1897, but it took another 10 years before they actually got the line along to Portishead, and it opened in 1907. But to get to the Portishead terminus, you had to go through the archway of the White Lion, and you then arrived at a little simple timber structure which had a ticket office and a waiting room and a ladies' room. It wasn't very profitable.
It used to stop about every half a mile, didn't it? There'd be a halt or another little stopping off space.
It used to take half an hour to get to Clevedon from Portishead, and it's even reputed that there was a notice on a station somewhere, please do not pick blackberries while the train is in motion. I mean, it wasn't known for speed particularly.
Did you know that much of Portishead was owned by Bristol Corporation? In 1660, the corporation bought the manors of Portishead and North Weston and continued to buy the land and property well into the 19th century.
This imposing building, best viewed from the channel, is another of Portishead's landmarks, the Nautical School. It originated from a scheme by Henry Fedden and Augustine Woodward, who back in 1869 leased the training ship Formidable from the Admiralty to provide training and shelter for street urchins from poor and deprived homes. The ship was a familiar, if somewhat Dickensian sight, lying at anchor just off Portishead for nearly 40 years. In 1906, Princess Helena opened the new school, and the 350 boys moved in. They were given training designed to prepare them for the Royal and Merchant Navies or to learn a trade. Discipline was strict. Local mothers threatened to send their children to the nautical school when they misbehaved. In 1982, the boys held their last parade, and the nautical school closed its doors. At first, there were plans to demolish it, but a developer bought it and transformed it into luxury flats. Its new name is Fedden Village, after the man who founded the nautical school more than 100 years earlier.
Portishead may not have rivalled Weston-super-Mare as a holiday resort, but plenty of visitors came to enjoy themselves. There was even a brisk trade of holiday souvenirs of the town. Ken Crowhurst's collection of china is over 100 years old.
I don't know if you've got a favourite, but I like this one, which has got a very splendid picture on the side. A present from Adelaide Terrace, Portishead. And
it's got this moustache guard or other like that to keep keep your moustache out from dripping into the
yes.
Tea or coffee.
You can imagine a Victorian gentleman with a nice big handlebar moustache. That would be absolutely perfect.
And this is what he would have kept his watch in. This is a little watch box.
Oh.
Presumably you left it on display.
Just little souvenirs to take home, aren't they? This is an intriguing one. It's perpetual calendar and postal ruler. What does this do?
It looks as though you just rotate the end here and you put the day appropriate to the first of the month. So you've then got one, you can reset this once a month.
Right.
Obviously you can draw straight lines with this as a ruler. It's got the postal rates on, it's got a scale on it for measuring. I've never seen anything quite like that. And a picture of Portishead.
And a picture of Portishead just to top it all off.
People still enjoy a visit to Portishead, of course, and a stroll along the seafront. When the weather's fine, the open-air pool beckons for those who like to swim and those who like to watch.
Now every year about July when summertime comes round, there's lots and lots of people at the seaside to be found. Some play golf or tennis, others like to take a rest. But here's the kind of exercise that I enjoy the best when I go swimming with the women. Gee, I do have a real good time.
Competition time now, and your chance to win a £15 book token. Take a look at this. It's a place we visited in our Look Back 2000 series, but where is it? If you think you know, send your answer, along with your name and address, to Look Back 2000, HTV, Bath Road, Bristol.
Answers by Friday, please. This is last week's mystery place, correctly identified by Harry Boubier of Bridgewater as Bridgewater. Well done, Harry.
Well, that's it from Portishead today. Our thanks to Ken and to everyone who's helped show us around. We've had a lovely time. Now, don't forget, if you've got any photos or old footage that you think we might be interested in, we'd love to hear from you. We're particularly interested in Warminster, Wedmore and St Paul's in Bristol. So give our man Morris in the office a ring.
Well, his number's on the screen now. Next week, Polly and I are turning up at Burnham-on-Sea, and amongst the memories there, the church that really did help light up the world, and the American bomber that had a forced landing on the beach. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.